They hurt you and act like nothing happened. As Carl Jung once said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But what happens when someone deeply wounds you, then walks away as if nothing ever happened? In today's video on spiritual wisdom, we're going to uncover the hidden psychology behind why people can hurt you and still sleep peacefully at night, and how you can transform that pain into personal power. As you listen, think about the moments in your life when you felt this silent betrayal, and ask yourself, what did it teach you about your own strength? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, so share your experiences and let's grow together. 1. They remember everything but refuse accountability. They remember every detail, every word, every glance that betrayed their true intent, yet they will never admit it. This is not forgetfulness. It is a deliberate choice, a wall built to protect the fragile architecture of their ego. Acknowledging what they did would mean dismantling the image they have carefully constructed of themselves as good, righteous, or justified. For people whose identity depends on that illusion, confession is not just uncomfortable, it is soul-threatening. Their ego fears that if they face the truth, the entire edifice will crumble, and they will be left standing in the rubble of their own shadow. So they choose denial, not because they lack memory, but because the truth burns too brightly for them to look at directly. Denial becomes their shield, allowing them to rewrite history in their mind, turning themselves into the misunderstood, the justified, or even the victim, while quietly erasing your pain from the narrative. In their inner courtroom, they are both the accused and the judge, and to rule against themselves would be to hand down a sentence they could not survive. So they manipulate the evidence, twist the facts, and alter the sequence of events until their conscience is lulled back into silence. They can sleep soundly, not because they are innocent, but because they have locked the truth away in a place where it can no longer disturb them. And yet, deep within, the memory remains. They carry it in the quiet chambers of their mind, an unspoken record that they will never show you. This is why you lie awake at night, replaying the moments. While they go on with their lives as though nothing happened, they have not forgotten. They have simply buried the truth so far down that it no longer touches the surface. Understanding this is a turning point for the soul, because it releases you from the exhausting quest for acknowledgement that may never come. Waiting for their apology is like standing at a train station for a train that was never scheduled to arrive. It drains your hope and binds your healing to their willingness to face themselves. But they have chosen self-preservation over self-awareness, illusion over truth. And the more you understand that, the more you realize that their silence says nothing about your worth and everything about their fear. They are not ready to confront the darkness within, and perhaps they never will be. The shadow, as Carl Jung taught, is the part of the psyche that contains all that we refuse to see in ourselves, and it takes courage to bring it into the light. Not everyone will make that journey, and forcing them will only pull you deeper into their denial. Your task is not to drag them into the light, but to keep your own light alive. The flame of your soul cannot be entrusted to someone who fears their own reflection. You are not here to wait for their conscience to awaken, nor to sacrifice your peace at the altar of their silence. You are here to protect the essence of who you are, to choose freedom over the invisible chains of their denial, and to understand that healing is not found in their confession, but in your decision to stop carrying the weight of their refusal to see the truth. They will remember for the rest of their lives what they did. You just have to decide that you will no longer let their choice to deny it define yours. Comment below, I choose truth over denial. If you're ready to stand in your power and never let someone's refusal to take accountability define your worth. 2. Shadow projection as self-protection. Carl Jung taught us that the shadow is the part of ourselves we try to hide the flaws, fears, and uncomfortable truths we cannot bear to face. When a person refuses to deal with their own darkness, they will often unconsciously project it onto someone else, making that person carry the guilt, shame, and pain they will not acknowledge. In this way, they shift the emotional weight off themselves, twisting the story until you become the one who is wrong, broken, or untrustworthy. This process, which Jung called shadow projection, allows them to feel safer in their own mind, but it leaves you burdened with emotions that were never yours to carry. You may see it when a coworker makes a costly mistake, yet subtly blames you in front of others. When a friend spreads hurtful rumors to hide their own poor choices, or when a partner accuses you of betrayal while they themselves have been dishonest. In each case, the pattern is the same. They protect themselves from the pain of self-awareness by placing it on you. And because facing the truth would shatter the image they have built, they carry on as if nothing happened. You are left questioning your own reality, feeling unsettled and wronged, while they seem untouched. It is like trying to speak to a mirror that only reflects what it wants you to see. It hides the stains and cracks, presenting a controlled version of reality that keeps them safe and you trapped in confusion. Carl Jung's wisdom urges us to recognize this behavior for what it is, because once you see the projection, you can step out of the role they have assigned you. You begin to understand that their accusations are simply echoes of their own inner battles, and you stop taking responsibility for wounds you did not cause. In modern life, learning to identify and resist shadow projection is a form of emotional self-defense. It allows you to set boundaries, respond with calm instead of anger, and keep your peace without guilt. The value here is in reclaiming your emotional sovereignty, because when you no longer carry the shadows of others, you protect the clarity of your own mind and the integrity of your soul. You cannot stop people from projecting, but you can refuse to let their unhealed wounds define you. 3. Silence as a weapon. When someone chooses silence instead of addressing the pain they caused you, it is rarely accidental. It is often a calculated act, a spiritual tactic of control disguised as indifference. This silence is not the peaceful kind that heals. It is the kind that wounds, erodes, and manipulates. By refusing to respond, they shift the emotional burden entirely onto you, forcing you to replay every word, every moment, every possible misstep in your mind, as though the cause of the rupture must be your fault. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Yet in the hands of someone who wields silence as a weapon, that irritation becomes a carefully laid psychological trap. Their non-response plants seeds of self-doubt in your mind until you begin questioning your own memory, your own feelings, and even your own worth. They know that human beings are wired for closure, for the reassurance of being heard, and when that need is denied, it creates a craving for an emotional dependency that can tether you to them long after the relationship has turned toxic. This tactic is especially dangerous because it allows them to shield themselves from consequences. Without words, there is nothing to refute, no confession to hold against them, no tangible proof of wrongdoing. And in that vacuum, you are left to fill the silence with your own interpretations, often ones that condemn yourself. In spiritual terms, this is the corrosion of your inner light through emotional starvation. Communication is the lifeblood of connection, and when it is deliberately withheld, it is not just your mind that suffers, but your soul. Lao Tzu said, "Silence is a source of great strength, but in the wrong hands, it becomes a silent war, one where the battlefield is your heart, and the wounds are invisible." Over time, the confusion they create turns into self-censorship. You stop expressing your feelings out of fear of more silence, and in doing so, you shrink your emotional presence in the relationship. This shrinking is what they count on. The smaller you feel, the larger their control grows. It is a cycle that can only be broken when you recognize silence for what it truly is. Not a neutral absence of words, but a deliberate signal meant to disempower you. This pattern reveals more about their inability to face truth than it does about your worthiness of love or respect. People who cannot engage in honest dialogue often carry unresolved shadows of the very parts of themselves they cannot bear to confront. By staying silent, they avoid the mirror you hold up to their actions. Jung taught that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And in this case, their unconscious avoidance drives their behavior. Your task is not to see the silence as a reflection of your inadequacy, but as evidence of their unhealed wounds. That awareness turns silence from a chain into a message, a sign that your spiritual boundaries must be fortified. You reclaim your power by refusing to beg for answers they will never give, by no longer dancing to the rhythm of their withholding. Instead, you speak your truth, even if they refuse to hear it. And in doing so, you shift the balance of power back into your own hands. The silence that once kept you trapped becomes the stillness that sets you free when you use it to listen to your own soul rather than their absence. If this message speaks to your experience, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a lesson. Together, we'll uncover the truth behind silent manipulation and reclaim your emotional power. 4. The innocent persona and ego protection. The innocent persona is not true innocence, but a mask carefully crafted to protect the ego and avoid the discomfort of self-confrontation. People who adopt it operate from a deep fear that admitting their faults will shatter the identity they have clung to for years, sometimes for their entire lives. This fear drives them to hide behind a facade of perpetual goodness, convincing themselves and others that they could never intentionally cause harm. Carl Jung's reminder that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate applies perfectly here, because their refusal to face their shadow ensures they remain trapped in the same patterns, never allowing their soul to evolve. They do not merely want to be seen as innocent. They need to be seen that way. for their sense of self depends on it. You may notice how such people quickly deflect blame, rewrite events, or retreat into self-pity, playing the role of the misunderstood victim. They may give half-hearted apologies filled with vague words that never truly admit wrongdoing. Or they may pretend the hurt never occurred at all, acting as if silence can erase memory. This behavior is not random. It is a defense mechanism honed over years to protect the ego from the death that comes with humility and self-awareness. Often, the roots of this mask lie in early experiences where admitting mistakes brought punishment, humiliation, or rejection. So the psyche learned to survive by avoiding fault at all costs. But this self-protection comes with a heavy price. It walls them off from growth, intimacy, and the deep healing that only truth can bring. Beneath the surface, there is a spiritual stagnation that robs them of genuine connection. The soul cannot expand inside the prison of denial, and so their relationships often feel hollow, filtered through layers of performance rather than authentic vulnerability. You may feel an emptiness in their presence, a lack of depth that comes from never meeting the real person, only their carefully maintained image. Understanding this frees you from the exhausting need to make them see the truth, because acknowledgement is not only about willingness, it is about readiness. A soul still hiding in the comfort of false innocence cannot yet bear the weight of self-awareness. Your role is not to force their awakening, but to honor your own. See the mask for what it is, protect your peace, and set clear boundaries without guilt. Recognize that their inability to face reality is not a reflection of your value, but of their fear. When you stop trying to extract truth from someone committed to avoiding it, you reclaim your own energy. And in doing so, you choose to live in alignment with truth, allowing your soul to keep moving toward transformation and spiritual wholeness, unburdened by the illusions they insist on keeping. Comment below. I choose truth over illusion if you're ready to let go of false innocence and step into real transformation. 5. Gaslighting and rewriting reality. Gaslighting is one of the most subtle yet destructive forms of manipulation, and Carl Jung's insight into the human shadow reveals why it leaves such deep wounds. When someone deliberately deflects, denies, or twists events, they are not just disagreeing with you. They are reshaping your reality, making you doubt what you saw, felt, and experienced. This is not about truth. It's about control. They reframe the story so they become either the victim who deserves sympathy or the hero who deserves praise. And with enough repetition, their version starts to sound convincing even to you. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And gaslighting operates in that unconscious space, exploiting your natural desire for harmony and understanding. In modern life, this might look like a partner who betrayed your trust but insists you remember it wrong, or a coworker who steals your ideas but makes you feel irrational for pointing it out. Over time, these experiences chip away at your self-trust, leaving you dependent on their distorted narrative to define reality. What's really happening is projection. They cannot face their own guilt, shame, or insecurity, so they push it onto you, making you carry the emotional weight they refuse to confront. In today's hyper-connected world, the damage can be even greater, as social media gives them a stage to rewrite events publicly, gain sympathy, and portray themselves as righteous, while you are left isolated and doubting yourself. This is why protecting your mind is essential. Keep a clear record of what happened. Trust the quiet voice inside that knows the truth, and surround yourself with people who affirm reality rather than distort it. You don't have to fight every battle or prove yourself to someone determined to misunderstand you. Boundaries are not just a defense. They are a declaration that your inner world is sacred territory. Their denial is not proof that you are wrong. It's proof that they cannot face themselves. Carl Jung's wisdom shows us that healing begins when you stop surrendering your truth to another's illusion, when you choose to see with clarity instead of through the lens they hand you, and when you reclaim the authority to define your own story. 6. Emotional immaturity limits accountability. When someone hurts you and acts as if nothing happened, it's often not because they've forgotten or because your pain was insignificant, but because they have reached an emotional ceiling, a limit in their capacity to take responsibility for their actions. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." And in this truth lies a mirror. Their inability to face you honestly is not a reflection of your value, but of their own inner fractures. For those trapped in emotional immaturity, accountability feels like a threat to their very identity. Admitting fault is not just uncomfortable, it is terrifying, because in their minds, to confess wrongdoing is to dismantle the fragile self-image they've been protecting for years. They fear that acknowledging the harm they've caused will shatter the mask they wear, forcing them to confront wounds they've spent a lifetime avoiding. This is why genuine apologies from them are so rare, not because they don't remember, but because self-preservation overrides integrity. It's like living in a house where the walls have been painted over countless times to hide deep cracks. Asking them to apologize is like asking them to scrape away the paint and face the truth beneath. The cracks have always been there, but they would rather keep repainting than risk the collapse of the whole structure. In the real world, you see this in the person who ghosts you after a disagreement, the friend who changes the subject when confronted, or the one who offers the hollow phrase, "I'm sorry if you felt hurt," instead of admitting, "I hurt you and I was wrong." True accountability requires the spiritual strength to step outside the ego, to face shame without retreat, and to integrate the lesson into the soul. And that is a strength many never develop. Their silence or deflection is not proof of your unworthiness. It is evidence of their limits. If you allow their refusal to take responsibility to determine your self-worth, you will remain chained to their emotional capacity, and that is a prison you do not deserve. Your healing cannot depend on the words they withhold. Jung warned, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And for the emotionally immature, avoidance is just that, their unconscious programming running on autopilot. They are not ready to face themselves, but you can face yourself. Instead of waiting for them to offer the apology you've been longing for, speak those words to your own soul. "I deserved better, and I release this." In that moment, you reclaim your power, not because they changed, but because you chose truth over denial, growth over ego, and peace over the false hope of closure. Understand that a real apology is not about the arrangement of words. It is about transformation. And transformation demands courage, humility, and spiritual maturity, qualities they may not yet possess. Your path is not to drag them into the light, but to walk so deeply on your own that their recognition is no longer needed for you to know your worth. That is the kind of inner freedom that no one can take away. And it is the quiet victory that allows your soul to rise, untethered, into the life you were meant to live. If you've made it this far, drop a comment saying, "I'm aware," below. Your voice matters, and it helps us create content that truly resonates with you. 7. Repetition, compulsion, and echo chambers. They are not simply unaware of the pain they cause. They are bound to what Carl Jung described as repetition compulsion, an unconscious drive that compels them to relive the same destructive cycles again and again, like an actor locked into a script that has no ending. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate, Jung warned. And for these individuals, their unexamined wounds and buried shadows shape every choice, every reaction, every relationship. The soul, carrying scars they refuse to acknowledge, moves them toward the familiar, even if the familiar is toxic. Instead of seeking spaces or relationships that challenge their illusions, they surround themselves with enablers who echo back their distorted self-image. These people form a protective wall around them, insulating them from the sharp edge of truth, and together they create psychological echo chambers where lies sound like facts and self-deception becomes a way of life. Within this environment, they are always the misunderstood hero or the victim of cruelty, never the one who inflicted harm. Any presence that threatens to crack this illusion is swiftly cut away, which is why they vanish from your life so quickly after betraying you, not because they feel remorse, but because your very existence is proof of their wrongdoing, and they cannot bear to face it. Inside these echo chambers, reality becomes elastic. Conversations are rehearsed in their favor, inconvenient facts are erased, and every story is retold in a way that absolves them. It is not that they forget what they did, they remember every detail, but they manipulate those memories until they can live with them. The soul, however, never forgets. The unhealed wound remains, festering beneath the surface, and though they bury it under distractions, noise, and the validation of their chosen circle, it weighs heavier with time. Occasionally, in rare moments of stillness, the truth knocks, sometimes as a quiet pang of conscience, sometimes as a sudden wave of discomfort, but they quickly drown it out. They turn to the familiar patterns that numb the discomfort, blaming others, finding new enablers, repeating the same betrayals. This cycle is like a wheel that never stops turning, crushing genuine connection under the weight of their denial. Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." But for them, pain is the enemy, not the teacher. They choose delusion over awakening, comfort over truth, control over growth. And so they live in a prison of their own making, one where every wall is a reflection of their false self, every doorway blocked by the fear of facing the reality of their actions. The tragedy is not only the harm they cause to others, it is the slow erosion of their own soul, the loss of the possibility of true intimacy, integrity, and redemption. In protecting their ego, they sacrifice their humanity, and in silencing their conscience, they silence the very part of themselves that could set them free. And so, the cycle continues. Each repetition a deeper engraving on the soul. Each echo chamber a little louder, until truth itself becomes a stranger they no longer recognize. 8. Your healing doesn't require their change. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And within this truth lies a lesson that can save years of emotional suffering. Your healing does not depend on someone else changing. Too many people remain trapped in cycles of pain because they are waiting for an apology, a confession, or a sudden awakening from the very person who hurt them. They believe that if they explain their pain enough times, offer enough love, or show enough patience, the other person will finally open their eyes and take responsibility. But Jung's wisdom is clear. You cannot force someone into consciousness. No matter how many conversations you initiate, or how clearly you lay out the truth, if their mind is closed, your words will be like seeds scattered on stone. A close friend of mine once spent years in a relationship where she was constantly disrespected and emotionally neglected. She convinced herself that if she just endured, loved him harder, and proved her loyalty, he would change. But he never did, because his comfort in staying the same outweighed any discomfort her absence might have caused. She eventually realized that his lack of change had nothing to do with her worth and everything to do with his refusal to face himself. That realization set her free. Accepting someone's limitations is not weakness, it is strength. It is clarity that allows you to see them for who they are, without the haze of false hope. It is choosing not to walk in circles, waiting for the impossible, but instead moving forward and building a life that protects your peace. Protecting your peace means refusing to carry the weight of someone else's emotional immaturity on your back. You are not their savior, their therapist, or their emotional caretaker. Every moment you spend trying to drag an unwilling person towards self-awareness is a moment stolen from your own growth. The truth is that healthy relationships, whether romantic, familial, or platonic, require emotional maturity from both people. Without it, you are left managing chaos instead of cultivating connection. Carl Jung's insight invites you to shift your focus from trying to fix others to nurturing your own soul. Emotional freedom is born the moment you stop tying your happiness to someone else's transformation and start investing in your own. It is choosing relationships with people who meet you with respect, empathy, and honesty, rather than those who drain you with denial, defensiveness, and blame. It is honoring your boundaries not as walls that shut people out, but as gates that let the right people in. The more you protect your energy, the more space you create for peace, clarity, and joy to grow. And perhaps the most powerful truth of all is this: you don't have to wait for someone to change before you can be free. You can choose freedom now by releasing the need to rewrite their story and taking full authorship of your own, because the only transformation you can control and the only soul you are responsible for is your own. As we explore this truth together, let's reaffirm our commitment to protecting our peace and choosing emotionally mature connections. Your presence here shows your dedication to healing and growth. Comment below: I choose peace over chaos, as a declaration of your journey toward true freedom. And so, the truth is often far more complex than we imagine. The reasons people hurt you and then carry on as if nothing happened, may have little to do with forgetfulness and everything to do with their own shadows, defenses, and unacknowledged guilt. By understanding these deeper patterns, as Carl Jung taught, we not only protect our hearts, but also reclaim our power to respond with clarity rather than confusion. If this insight has given you a new perspective, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. And be sure to turn on notifications so you never miss our upcoming videos filled with more thought-provoking lessons for your journey. You'll never let addiction win again after this. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. Carl Jung's words cut straight to the heart of addiction. In today's video from Spiritual Wisdom, we'll uncover the mindset shift that takes away addiction's power, not by sheer force, but by courageously turning inward and meeting the parts of ourselves we've been running from. This is not just about breaking a habit. It's about reclaiming your freedom and your wholeness. As you watch, think about this. What truth about yourself have you been avoiding? And what would happen if you faced it today? Share your reflections in the comments. Your story could be the lifeline someone else needs. 1. Addiction is not just about substances or habits. It's a symptom of deeper, unacknowledged inner pain. Addiction is not merely about a substance or a repeated habit. It is the symptom of a far deeper, often unacknowledged wound that lives within the hidden corridors of the soul. Carl Jung saw addiction not as a flaw of character, but as the shadow's disguise, a clever mask the mind wears to avoid confronting the rejected, wounded, or concealed parts of the self. The shadow is not evil by nature. It is the repository for all the experiences, emotions, and desires that we have pushed away because we could not, or would not, face them. Within it lie the childhood traumas we never spoke of, the grief we tried to bury, the shame we hoped no one would ever see, and the longings we labeled unacceptable. Over time, these hidden fragments do not disappear. They simply shape our behavior from behind the scenes, pulling strings we don't even know are there. Jung once observed, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. This avoidance is not weakness, nor is it laziness. It is a survival mechanism, formed in moments when the truth felt too heavy to bear. But what once helped us survive eventually becomes the very prison that keeps us from living. Addiction, in any form, whether to alcohol, work, food, gambling, toxic relationships, or even constant distraction, serves as the mask that allows us to keep turning away from the mirror of the soul. And here is the paradox. When we try to fight addiction with sheer willpower, we often find ourselves losing. We may quit one habit only to replace it with another, stop one behavior only to develop a different compulsion. The surface changes, but the wound beneath remains untouched, calling out for recognition in another form. Jung understood that true freedom from addiction does not come from crushing the shadow into silence, but from integrating it into our conscious life. The shadow must be brought into the light, not to be destroyed, but to be understood, accepted, and reintegrated into the whole of who we are. This is not a comfortable process. It requires the courage to sit in the raw presence of our pain, to acknowledge what we have avoided, and to give voice to the truths we have long kept silent. It means meeting our shame with compassion rather than condemnation, and allowing ourselves to feel what we once numbed at all costs. In doing so, We reclaim the exiled pieces of our soul, not because we were broken, but because those pieces were left behind in our desperate attempts to survive. The shift that makes addiction powerless is not a moment of brute strength, but a moment of radical understanding. Addiction is no longer seen as an enemy to defeat, but as a messenger bearing news from the deepest part of ourselves. The very thing we thought was destroying us becomes the signpost pointing toward what needs healing. When we stop waging war against the symptom and start listening to the message, the compulsion begins to lose its grip. We no longer need it to numb or distract us because we have turned to face the source of our pain directly. In that confrontation, we find that the pain holds within it a hidden wisdom. And when we honor that wisdom, our soul begins to heal in ways that no quick fix, no temporary relief could ever offer. If you're ready to face your shadow and begin healing the pain beneath addiction, comment below. I choose to heal, to take the first step toward true freedom. 2. Cravings are messengers, not enemies. Cravings are not your enemy. They are messengers from the deepest parts of you, carrying truths your conscious mind has tried to bury. Carl Jung, the brilliant Swiss psychiatrist whose work still shapes how we understand the soul, once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." That is exactly what happens when we fight cravings with nothing but willpower, trying to crush them without asking the one question that truly matters. What are you trying to tell me? Every craving, whether it's for sugar, alcohol, a cigarette, a toxic relationship, or hours lost in endless scrolling, is not simply about the object of desire. It's a signal, a flare from your inner world pointing towards something far more important. Loneliness you haven't voiced, fears you've been avoiding, needs you've been denying, or wounds you've never fully healed. In the modern world, we're conditioned to see cravings as weaknesses to conquer. We are told to distract ourselves, suppress them, or drown them in discipline. But what if they are not weaknesses at all? What if they are invitations that open doors into a deeper understanding of yourself? Think about someone who comes home every night after long, exhausting hours of work and feels an almost irresistible pull toward pouring a drink. On the surface, it looks like poor self-control. But if they stop and truly listen, they might discover that the craving is not for alcohol. It's for connection, for warmth, for a life that feels alive. It's the aching reminder that the silence of an empty home is not what their soul longs for. And if they answer that deeper need by finding community, rekindling old passions, or creating a sense of meaning, the craving begins to fade, not because they forced it away, but because its message has been heard. Carl Jung's teachings show us that the unconscious mind always finds a way to speak, and cravings are one of its clearest languages. Every urge is like a persistent knock at the door of your awareness. Ignore it, and it grows louder. Slam the door, and it pounds harder. But open it, and you may find that what you feared was a destructive force is actually a guide pointing you toward the healing you've been searching for. Yet in today's culture, we have mastered the art of drowning these signals. We binge watch shows to escape, scroll through social media to numb, shop to fill a void, or overwork to avoid stillness. All of these are disguises for the same truth your soul is trying to speak to you, but you've been too busy to listen. The shift happens when you stop seeing cravings as battles to win and start seeing them as conversations to have. You don't need to fight them. You need to sit with them. You need to ask, what is this feeling really about? Sometimes the answer will surprise you. It might be grief. It might be unexpressed anger. It might be the longing to be seen, loved, and understood. And once you address that core wound, the craving no longer needs to shout. The truth is, addiction begins to lose its power over you, not when you overpower it, but when you understand it. The real struggle is not against the craving itself, but against the disconnection from your own truth. When the next urge rises, don't rush to suppress it. Pause. Breathe. Let it speak. Because the craving that once felt like chains holding you down might actually be the key to unlocking the very door you've been afraid to open. In the quiet space of listening without judgment, you'll find that every craving you've ever had was never about weakness. It was about the soul's attempt to bring you home to yourself. 3. Willpower alone fails because it exhausts you. Willpower alone fails because it drains the very life out of you, leaving you exhausted, frustrated, and trapped in the same cycle you swore you'd escape. You push and push, believing that sheer force will be enough, but it's like trying to hold back the ocean with your bare hands. The waves will always return. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This is why real change is never born from willpower alone. It is born from awareness. It begins the moment you stop fighting blindly and start paying attention. The moment you pause when the craving comes, look it in the eye, and name it. You begin to ask the deeper questions. What is this craving trying to tell me? What wound is it hiding? What emptiness is it trying to fill? And in that stillness, the craving is no longer just a force pulling you into darkness. It becomes a messenger from the depths of your soul, pointing you towards something within that has been left unattended for far too long. Jung understood that addiction is not merely a mental or physical weakness. It is, at its core, a spiritual crisis. It is the soul's desperate cry to reconnect with something sacred that has been lost. When you rely only on willpower, you're standing at the edge of a river trying to block the current without ever exploring where the water comes from. Awareness, however, invites you to walk upstream, to find the hidden spring, to understand why the waters flow the way they do. It allows you to notice the subtle triggers, the loneliness that creeps in late at night, the boredom that numbs your mind, the unresolved pain that whispers in moments of stillness. And instead of letting these moments control you, you meet them with compassion and curiosity. In doing so, you take back the power you thought you had lost. In everyday life, you can see this truth in the way habits hold people hostage. Whether it's the constant pull towards cigarettes, the compulsion to overeat, the mindless hours lost to scrolling on your phone, or the repeated return to a toxic relationship, the pattern is the same. Sheer will can hold it off for a while, but eventually the craving wins. That's because the habit is never the true problem. It's the visible symptom of something hidden. As Eckhart Tolle wisely said, what you resist persists. The more you treat the craving as an enemy, the more it thrives in the shadows, waiting for the moment your defenses weaken. But when you turn toward it with awareness, when you stop running and start listening, you strip it of its power because it can no longer hide from you. The true shift that makes addiction powerless is not about tightening your grip. It's about loosening it in the right way. It's about stepping into the role of a conscious observer of your own mind and spirit, tracing the roots of your patterns and unraveling them with patience. It's the willingness to feel discomfort without being consumed by it, to sit in the presence of the craving and say, I see you, I hear you, I know what you're trying to tell me, and I will tend to that truth. This is the essence of spiritual mastery, not the absence of temptation, but the presence of deep, unwavering awareness. And in that awareness, the craving dissolves, not because you crushed it, but because you understood it. Once it is brought into the light, it no longer has a place to hide, and you are finally free, not by force, but by truth. If this perspective resonates with you, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let's keep uncovering the deeper truth about lasting change together. 4. Facing the shadow transforms it. Suppressing an urge is like trying to hold back a tide with your bare hands. The more you fight it, the more force it gathers. Carl Jung understood that this resistance does not dissolve the craving. It strengthens it, feeding it with the very energy of your denial. He wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And in that truth lies the key to transformation." Addiction is not just a behavior or a bad habit. It is a signal from the soul, a manifestation of an unacknowledged shadow calling out to be seen. When you meet that shadow with attention, honesty, and curiosity instead of fear or shame, its grip weakens, and the healing process begins. The shadow thrives in secrecy, and when we hide from it, it grows in the dark like roots spreading underground, unseen but powerful. By bringing it into the light, we rob it of that hidden strength. This does not mean indulging every impulse, but rather observing it without judgment, asking what message it holds. Often, the craving itself is not for the substance, the behavior, or the distraction, but for the comfort, relief, or escape it symbolizes. Someone who pours another drink may actually be reaching for peace after a day of silent emotional battles, just as someone who loses themselves in endless scrolling may be seeking connection they cannot find in the real world. When you pause and acknowledge the craving, saying, I see you, I understand why you're here, you stop waging war against yourself and begin a conversation with the deeper truth your soul has been trying to express. Facing the shadow is an act of compassion, not condemnation. It is choosing to treat the wounded parts of yourself not as enemies to be eradicated, but as children needing guidance. Each urge becomes an invitation to uncover the unmet needs, unresolved grief, or suppressed desires hiding beneath the surface. In this way, the shadow ceases to be an obstacle and becomes a guide. You realize that darkness is not the opposite of light, but its partner in creating wholeness. The addiction loses its power, not because it vanishes instantly, but because it no longer controls the choices you make. You integrate the lesson it carried, and in doing so, restore balance between the conscious mind and the hidden layers of your being. Over time, the inner struggle fades. What once felt like an overpowering force becomes just another wave in the ocean of your awareness, noticed, understood, and allowed to pass without pulling you under. This is the transformation Jung spoke of, the moment when the unconscious no longer directs your life in secret. By facing the shadow, you reclaim authorship of your own fate, living not in reaction to your hidden fears, but in harmony with the full truth of who you are. And in that harmony, the soul is free, and addiction has no hold. 5. Use the energy of craving for transformation. Carl Jung once said that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And when it comes to addiction, this truth reveals a powerful key to freedom. Every craving you feel, whether for a cigarette, a drink, unhealthy food, or the endless pull of your phone, is not just a meaningless impulse. It is a surge of pure, raw energy waiting to be claimed. The real problem is not the craving itself, but the pattern you've been conditioned to follow. The automatic path that channels that energy into the same destructive habits over and over again. But cravings can be transformed. The energy they hold can be redirected into new, soul-nourishing rituals. Writing down your thoughts, moving your body, breathing deeply, or engaging in self-reflection that brings clarity instead of chaos. In a world that offers instant gratification at every turn, it's no wonder so many people feel powerless against their urges. Yet within every moment of desire lies a hidden opportunity for transformation. The restlessness that pushes you toward unhealthy choices can become the same fire that fuels your growth. The urge to binge on junk food can power an intense workout. The impulse to get lost in endless scrolling can drive you to finally begin a creative project you've been postponing for years. It's not about killing the craving. It's about giving it a new purpose. I once knew a man who battled alcohol for over 2 decades. Each evening, like clockwork, he felt the familiar pull that used to lead him straight to the bar. But instead of giving in, he began walking to a nearby park, breathing in the fresh air and listening to music that lifted his spirit. At first, the cravings grew louder, almost angry that he was ignoring them. But with each redirection, something shifted. He began to see that alcohol had never been the true need. It was connection, movement, and a sense of being alive that his soul was hungry for. Over time, the same energy that once drove his addiction became the energy that rebuilt his life. Every craving is a crossroad. One path takes you back to temporary relief, followed by the same emptiness. The other path leads to conscious transformation, where the energy that once chained you becomes the force that sets you free. Instead of asking, "How do I stop wanting this?" ask, "What can I create with this energy?" That question changes everything. It may lead you to write a song, dance in your kitchen, call someone you love, pray, meditate, paint, or simply breathe until the urge softens into peace. Your cravings are not your enemies. They are messengers, pointing you toward the places where your spirit longs for more. When you learn to feed that hunger with purpose, creativity, and presence, you discover a kind of freedom that no temporary fix could ever give you. If this message resonates with you, comment, "I'm transforming," below, and let us know how you're turning your cravings into growth. Your voice inspires others on the same journey. 6. Individuation is the ultimate goal. Individuation is the ultimate goal. And in the deepest spiritual sense, it is the sacred journey of becoming the truest version of yourself, a self that is whole, integrated, and unafraid of its own depths. Recovery is not merely quitting a habit or resisting temptation. It is the profound act of gathering all the scattered pieces of your being, the light you proudly show, and the shadows you've tried to bury, and uniting them in harmony. As Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Addiction is rarely about the substance or behavior itself. It is a symptom of something far more hidden. Unresolved wounds, unmet needs, and parts of the soul that have been exiled. You may believe you're craving a drink, a cigarette, or a screen, but what you are truly craving is connection, safety, and the relief of being at home within yourself. When you only focus on stopping the behavior, you may remove the symptom, but the emptiness still lingers, waiting to manifest in another form. True recovery demands courage, the courage to turn toward the pain you've avoided, to listen to the voice in the shadows, and to invite it into the light. Jung also reminded us, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And yet, the moment you choose to face your soul, instead of running from it, the chains of addiction begin to loosen. This is not about exhausting yourself in an endless battle of willpower. It is about dissolving the very conditions that gave your cravings their power. In this process, something extraordinary begins to grow in self-trust. You discover that you can sit with discomfort and not be destroyed by it, that you can allow grief, anger, and longing to move through you without drowning in them, and that you can choose actions that honor your highest self rather than being ruled by impulse. Every moment of weakness becomes a mirror, showing you where you are still divided, and every step toward awareness strengthens the bridge between your conscious mind and the deeper truth of your soul. This is where recovery transforms from an act of survival into a work of spiritual art, turning pain into wisdom, fear into courage, and fragmentation into wholeness. When you reach this place, addiction no longer holds you because you no longer need it. Life itself becomes full enough, rich enough, and meaningful enough to be lived without escape. 7. Lasting change comes through small, consistent acts of self-awareness. Lasting change does not come from sudden bursts of willpower or dramatic promises made in moments of desperation. It grows quietly through small, consistent acts of self-awareness that accumulate over time, reshaping not only your habits, but also the very fabric of your soul. Carl Jung's timeless insight, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate, reveals the essence of this transformation. The real victory over addiction begins when you stop wearing the identity of the addict, like an unshakable shadow, and start embracing the role of the conscious chooser. This shift is not merely about resisting the drink, the cigarette, the pill, or the late-night scroll on your phone. It is about creating a new relationship with yourself, one built on compassion, awareness, and trust. At first, these moments of awareness may seem small and almost fragile, like a single candle in a dark room. But every pause before an impulse, every deep breath taken instead of reacting, every moment spent listening to the feeling behind the craving becomes a quiet rebellion against the old self that once lived on autopilot. With each conscious choice, you send a message to the deepest parts of your being that you are no longer a slave to old patterns. You are an active participant in your own freedom. This is not a quick or linear process. Some days you may stumble, but even in those moments, awareness is still at work, teaching you, guiding you, and reshaping your inner landscape. Over time, these repeated choices form a new rhythm of life, where your decisions are no longer dictated by compulsion, but by clarity. You begin to feel a quiet strength rising from within, the kind of strength that does not need to announce itself because it is rooted in truth. The old label of addict fades, not because you have erased your past, but because you have rewritten your present, and in doing so, you have claimed a future that belongs entirely to you. Each day becomes a subtle act of devotion to your own soul, an ongoing conversation between who you once were and who you are becoming. You start to notice that the cravings lose their sharp edge, not because they have disappeared entirely, but because they no longer define you. Your power lies not in fighting against the addiction with clenched fists, but in walking a new path with open eyes, making small, deliberate choices that accumulate into an unshakable way of being. And one day, without even realizing it, you will look back and see that the war you thought you were fighting has ended not with a single, dramatic victory, but with countless small acts of courage that turned struggle into strength and turned a wounded soul into a free one. If this speaks to your soul and you're ready to embody it, repeat after me. I choose awareness every day. I am no longer defined by my past. I am the conscious creator of my life. 8. Freedom is a daily practice. Freedom is a daily choice you make in the smallest and often most overlooked moments of your life. And it is in these moments that the battle against addiction is truly won. Each time a craving rises a pull toward the drink, the cigarette, the endless scrolling, or whatever form your escape takes, you are standing at a crossroads. One road leads to the familiar cycle that has kept you trapped for years, and the other is the path of reclaiming your life. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And addiction thrives in that avoidance, feeding on the refusal to sit with discomfort, to confront pain, and to face what lies deep within. But the moment you meet a craving, not with judgment or shame, but with curiosity and compassion, you change the entire dynamic. You no longer run from the urge. You lean into it and ask, "What are you here to teach me?" In that question lies your true power, not in gritting your teeth to resist, but in listening closely to what your soul has been trying to tell you all along. Think of the times you've been pulled into the trap of temptation after a long, exhausting day. A boss's harsh words, a fight with a loved one, or a crushing wave of loneliness, and all you wanted was to lose yourself in hours of television, food, or a numbing drink. In the past, the escape came almost automatically, disguised as self-care. But what if you paused instead? What if you asked yourself, what am I really craving right now? You might find it's not the drink you need, but the release of stress. Not the food you hunger for, but the comfort of connection. Not the distraction you seek, but the relief of being truly seen. I once heard the story of a man who had wrestled with alcohol for over 20 years. His breakthrough wasn't the day he promised never to drink again. It was the day he allowed himself to sit quietly with the craving and realized it wasn't about alcohol at all. It was about a desperate need for peace, for stillness, for a way to silence the constant noise in his mind. From that day, he began to find healthier ways to give himself those things, and the craving slowly began to lose its hold on him. Carl Jung saw addiction not as a moral failing, but as a symptom, a signal from deep within that something is out of balance and calling for your attention. This understanding shifts the fight entirely. You stop battling the craving as if it's an enemy to be defeated, and instead treat it as a messenger delivering urgent truth about your inner world. Meeting it with compassion, you begin to ask the right questions. Where am I hurting? What am I avoiding? What need am I not honoring? Over time, every encounter with a craving becomes an opportunity to heal. You start to notice that by choosing to stay present rather than escape, you are building strength, not just mental strength, but spiritual strength. You are proving to yourself over and over again that you are not powerless, that you are not broken, and that you no longer need to numb your reality to survive it. The truth is that freedom isn't won in a single dramatic gesture. It is built brick by brick through countless quiet victories. Every time you pause instead of reacting, every time you choose to feel instead of flee, you are rewriting your story. You are breaking generational patterns, healing wounds you may not have even known you carried, and transforming your life into something far more expansive than the craving ever promised. And though the craving may still visit you from time to time, it will no longer rule you. To affirm your dedication to living in freedom each day, declare it now. Comment below. I choose freedom to honor your journey and inspire others to meet their cravings with courage and compassion. And so, the real victory over addiction begins not with force, but with awareness by turning inward, meeting the parts of yourself you've been running from, and transforming them into allies rather than enemies. As Carl Jung taught us, what you resist not only persists, it grows stronger. But when you shift your mindset, when you embrace the message your soul is sending you, the grip of addiction loses its power. If this insight spoke to your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Leave a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos that could change the way you see yourself and the world.